lot of people struggle to get to the end of that first draft and finish the book. But what if you've done it? What if you get to the end of that first draft, you look over the book and it's not working? Now what do you do? That's what I'm talking about today, how to fix your book if it can be fixed. Now, what I'm going to talk about may not work for everybody. It may not be possible. Your book may not be salvageable, but this is one technique that I've applied, and I've given this advice to other people to help them with their own work. Whether you're a pantser or someone who plans their stories like I am, this technique can still be useful. If you're a pantser and you're just making it up completely and you've just written the draft and you've got it, and then you look back and think, it doesn't work for any number of reasons. I think it can be more challenging in some ways if you do plan your books, because you've created a framework, you've created some kind of pattern that you're following. Whereas if you pants the book, there isn't that same sort of restraints that you've got in your mind. So this is what I do when I've got to the end of the draft and something isn't working and I need to know how to fix it, or at least how to take a step back and work out what needs fixing. And that's part of the problem. You've spent so long working on this book, months, possibly years working on the book. You've got everything swirling around your head, the characters, the relationships, the story, the world building, if it's fantasy, whatever it might be, it's all in here, but it's also on the page. And sometimes there's a disconnect between what you think you've written and what you've actually written. I've had this before where I've gone to my editor and they've said, oh, you need to change this thing. And I've gone and looked at it thinking, I have already done that. In my brain I have, but on the paper I haven't. So that can sometimes happen. Right, let's get on to the technique. You can move this, what I'm about to say, online and do it digitally, but do it this way first because I think it's useful. Go and find a pad, a notepad. In the UK, this kind of size paper is called A4. I don't know what it is in other countries, but you get the idea of how big it is. Lined piece of paper, something like this. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to write a number down for each chapter, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, however many chapters you've got. And in one line only, write what the chapter is about, what's happening. Sum it up, not so-and-so kills this and then so-and-so kills that, or so-and-so goes on a quest from point A to point B. What is happening in that chapter that's so important? What is going on? It could be a relationship change, it could be an emotional beat, it could be a battle. Whatever the thing is, write down whose chapter it is. If you have more than one point of view in each chapter, it can be a little tricky, in which case I sort of do 2 lines if there's 2 points of view, so that you can say, half a chapter is about this person, half a chapter is about that person. I write multiple point of view books and each chapter is usually from a different person's point of view, so it makes that a little bit easier. Likewise, if it's one, just first person, the whole thing, this still works, because on that chapter 1, 2, 3, whatever, you're writing what are the key things that are going on. If you have multiple points of view and each chapter has a different person, you can write their name against whichever chapters they apply, 1, 4, 7, 12 and so on. That comes in really handy later on, and explain why. Now, before anyone kicks off or has a hissy fit and says, I can't sum my book into so few words, that's not the essence of my book, I don't want to do that, you better get used to it, because you're going to have to do it. There's the elevator pitch, whether you're self-published or traditionally published, whatever. People are going to say, so what's your book about? And you've got like 10 seconds to tell them what the book is about. So what I'm asking you to do, summarize it into a page, or however many pages there are per chapter. That's still a lot of words. That's still a lot more than you're going to get. You pick up any book in a bookshop, look at the number of words on the back that boil down the whole story. So you better get used to compressing it. And doing it this way at least gives you a chance to change things before it ever reaches that stage, before you have to do a covering letter, before you have to do a synopsis. So you take your first draft, you put all the numbers down, you write all the thing, and you summarize everything that's going on in the thing, in your book. This then allows you to take a step back. I talked about before how it's all in your head and it just makes it really, really complicated. This is where you can see what's missing and what's different. If you say, in chapter 1 this happens, and when you look back at it, it's not actually there, it's something different. You need to tweak it, that's something you can do. So fixing any differences is the first thing. Second thing is pacing. Be able to look at the whole book, you can see the rise and the fall. You can see the characters growing, you can see the changes, you can see how far before the big first main event, whatever it might be, that really hooks the reader. Now, some books are naturally slower, yes. Some things, chapter 1, something happens, it's the inciting incident, it kicks things off, and away you go. Thrillers are written like that. Something happens, like a Dean Koontz style book. A man finds a note on his windscreen that says, you've got to go here and kill this person, or go here, and if you don't, I'll kill 6 people. Ooh, right, what's going on? And away we go. So straight away we're off to the races and stuff's happening. Not every book is like that. However, there has to be something within the first few chapters to hook the reader, to make them interested, to make them want to keep reading and find out more. If you get 10 chapters in and then you say, oh, but this is where the story starts, then obviously that's something that needs a lot of attention. So, first thing is disconnects. This will allow you to see what's different. Second thing is pacing. And connected to that, the third thing is character arcs. If, like me, you have different chapters dedicated to each people, different characters, you can see when they crop up. And sometimes I've looked at it and thought, actually, I haven't come back to this character for quite a few. There's a bit of a longer gap, and I should kind of say what they've been doing in that interim. And I could put in a short chapter or a couple of scenes, or refer to them if I don't want to do a full chapter to describe what that person's been doing instead of showing it. I don't always want to show it. Sometimes it's not that important. You have someone else tell the another character about it if you want to do it that way. But this allows me to look at it and say, actually, if this is the main character, I've not dedicated nearly enough screen time, enough chapters to this character. Or if I've got 3 main points of view, but I've only kind of touched on one of them a little bit, I'm suddenly thinking, well, they're not a main character, they're a secondary character, and do they need to have chapters completely from their point of view? Would it be better from someone else's point of view? Things like that. It allows you to look again at the pattern and step back. But because you've boiled each chapter down into the core essence of what's going on, it allows you to scan your whole book in a way within sort of 3 or 4 pages and look at it and go, oh, right, I can see what's going on. Terry Pratchett is famous for saying, the first draft is you telling the story to yourself. Other people call the first draft the vomit draft because you're just getting all the words out on the page, getting it down, and that's where the real work begins. And I agree. I think you have to kind of translate your notes or the ideas in your head, get it down, and then you start working to make it closer to the image of what you've got in your brain. Someone else will read your book and give you feedback, and if it's miles off from what you wanted it to be, then you need to work on it. And this allows you to do some of that work before you even show your work to anybody else. The other thing this technique enables you to do is look at when certain information is introduced. Say you're doing a murder mystery and you want to plant certain clues, certain things, and you've put this on your plan where it says, chapter 3 is the first clue, chapter 17, and so on. You can look at it and think, actually, is that too late? Should I have put something in sooner? Should I have put more clues in? Because you don't want anybody to get to the end of any book and have the big reveal and say, well, that made no sense. There was no kind of clues to any of that. Readers love to kind of say that they're smart and they've worked it out, or at least if they get to the end and they find the answer, that it's justified, that if they go back and they see these things, it's been there. And so this allows you to look at things like that. Is there enough information about certain things? When is the information introduced? Does it have to be introduced in that way from that character's point of view? I recently read someone's work where they talked about something in the first 2 or 3 chapters. A lot of it was quite similar information. And so there was other things going on in the chapter, and so we're able to kind of compress chapters 2 and 3 and say, right, let's focus on the essence of what it's about. You introduce this kind of this mystery, this thing in chapter 1. 2 and 3, can we not focus more on character? Can we not focus on something else that needs to happen later in the story? Can we not raise something a little bit earlier? Because one of the things is there again comes back to pace. Not everything has to be fast, as I've said, but you need to give the readers a lot to chew on quite early on to interest them. Most often readers come to your book are not going to know your work. They read, they're familiar, their favourite authors, so-and-so's got a new book, I'll pick it up, I'll read it, sight and scene, or that sounds interesting. But if you're a brand new author to a lot of people, and that is for myself and many others, I've got to give them something in the first few chapters, some kind of hook, some kind of mystery, something a little different, something a little special. If the first few chapters is someone just going on and living their life as normal, that's nice. And there is a place for that kind of cozy fantasy or cozy kind of story, whatever it might be. But if yours isn't that kind of book and there's something else going on, then you need to hook the reader in some capacity early in the book. The other reason I say to do it on paper first is if you do it online straight away, you can start playing around with things and there isn't a word limit. Whereas if you've actually only got one line on a piece of paper, you can only get, 20, 25 words, whatever it is, per line. And that's it, that's your limit. You can't break the rules, you can't change it, you do it. Once you've got the whole plan, once you start thinking, I need to move things around, you can then transfer that online onto some program, you know, Excel or whatever you want to do, or postcards on a, you know, put them on your desk and start moving them around. Then you can start manipulating things. Then you can start seeing the flow of events. Then if you want to do graphs and charts or anything like that, that's up to you. I don't go to that level. Once I've got it on a piece of paper, it allows me to see things a lot clearer, to track the rise and fall, the pacing issues, all these other things. At that point, I then start making notes about what I want to change, and I'll start going through the book, focusing on different things. So if the first thing is pacing, I'll make a note on this document or a separate one of all the things that need attention, and I'll work on my draft on that. And I'll come back to this kind of document as a reference thing and say, right, character, at this point, this person needs to be introduced sooner, or I need to make a bit of a emotional change sooner, and I go and do that as another kind of draft. So I'm not doing all of the things all at once, because I think that can be a bit tangled and it can get a bit complicated. The other thing is, if you have separate characters on separate chapters, what you're also able to do is just read their chapters all the way through and look at the arc of that character over the course of the book. Who they are at the beginning, who they are at the end, what kind of rises and falls do they go through, and then just look at their chapters on the document. Does that need to change? Does that need to come in sooner? Do we need to move that around? You can do that character and then the next character and so on. Lots of different ways to do it, lots of different revisions. And I know it sounds like a lot of work, because it is, but if you do a lot of this work sooner, now, before you show it to anybody else, you won't be doing it later. I've never written a book and then had to say, right, I've had to throw out 80,000 words and then I wrote another 200,000 words on top of that. One, because I plan my books, and two, because I do these kind of edits myself, so that I know when I get to someone else who looks at the book, it's closer to what I've imagined it was going to be, and I don't get that kind of feedback. And this technique has really helped me solidify pacing, characters, world building, structure, and the difference between what's on the page and what's in my head. So go and try this technique if you've got a finished draft and you're struggling with it and you don't know what to do next. Have a go and start digging into the book, start revising it, start editing it. And once you've gone through this a number of times and you're thinking, I don't know what to do now, I've gone through it as far as I can and I need some help, that's when you now introduce it to a friend, a trusted reader, someone on a forum, whatever it might be. Get them to read it, get them to give you feedback, constructive feedback, useful feedback, and go in with certain questions if you have things that you're still concerned about. Right, that's what I'm going to talk about for today. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. I'll be back very soon with another video.